we will kick it off. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our February Tidal Tips and Techniques webinar. Today we're joined by two Tidal experts from our technical support organization. First, we've got Ken Kahinka, who's a last-minute fill-in for sick Sherry Dixon. So Ken, thank you very much for joining us today. And we also have Eric Smith, and they'll be leading our discussions today on these agenda items, right? So first we're gonna go through using best practices and customization for graphical views. We're gonna talk about applying filters and business activity tags. We're gonna go through correcting job execution workflows, go through improving troubleshooting with logging, and then lastly, I'll finalize things with some news of upcoming events. So before we get started, just a few pieces of housekeeping. All participants are in listen-only mode. We will be recording, and I am recording this session, and we will post it on the customer portal. Should be on by early next week. And if you do have questions, there's a WebEx Q&A panel on the right side of your screen. Enter your questions in there, and we're going to save the questions till the end. There's a lot that we're covering here, but we're going to save all the questions till the end. We'll answer as many as we can at the end. But for those that we don't get to, we will post answers once again on the portal where the recording is as well. So with that, let me turn it over to Ken, and Ken, take us forward.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate y'all taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Take a quick minute to introduce myself. Most people probably know me. Kenneth Kahinka. I go by Ken. I'm the head of the support organization, and I've been working with the Tidal products since 2006. Okay, so let's get started. One of the things this morning we'll talk about is some of the new graphical views that we have added to the product to make it easier for people to do, or customers to do, their day-to-day job. So what we're going to cover over the graphical view is, what are the different types of graphical view? Why are they useful? When you use one graphical view versus another to obtain the information that you're looking for. So everybody that's familiar with the product, just a quick recap. We have three views in job activity. So we have the grid view, which is provides a lot of information. It's very detailed. You can customize that and remove and add columns to add more information or remove information. And that's the view that most people use. But as we all know, going back to the prehistoric days, mankind has always had, drawings and stuff, and that, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So one of the things we have to take it from a grid view to a graphical view to where you have information that's in a picture format is the business views. Now, the business views is ones that you have to predefine. So whenever you're creating your job definitions, after you do that, you probably go in and create the business view. And within the business view, you can add and drag and, add different groups in, and it automatically shows the relationships between the various jobs and so forth. Again, this is something that you have to do ahead of time and have saved. The graphical views, they're pretty similar to the business view. However, the key difference there is that they're not predefined, and there's something that gets generated on the fly. So when you're looking at information and you see something, you're like, I wonder what's going on here, you can quickly go into a graphical view to present the information more clearly and to give you an understanding of what's happening and what's occurring and be able to make a decision there. So, again, the graphical views, as I said, they're created on the fly. They enable you to answer different type questions. You may have a question as to why is this job not running, or how come this is running slower than it ran last week. So it'll help you find bottlenecks. Can provide you insight into the job. It can give you insight as to when the jobs are expected to finish. If you have 1,000 jobs and you're looking at it and you're like, oh, okay. I see that the first job kicks off at 9 o'clock, but when is my schedule going to be finished? When am I going to go through all of these? So there's some graphical views that help answer those types of questions. So just to touch real quick, the types of graphical views, we have the PERT diagram, the Gantt chart, the double tree diagram, the status board, or some people call it the cabana, the critical path diagram, radial tree, and radial groups. So we're going to go over each one of those today and kind of show where they shine and how it can help you do your day-to-day job. So let's, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move over to the title product, and we're going to start discussing the various views there. So we'll notice here at the top, we have some new symbols that were not there in prior versions of 6, our title. These were added in 6.5.6 and, or excuse me, 6.5.5. And again, you know, these were added to help you do your day-to-day job. So you can select them from up here, or you can do a right click and select them from within the selection chart here. So let's get started. So the first one that I want to talk about this morning is the PERT diagram. What is a PERT diagram, and how does this, you know, how is this useful? So if you have a group, say, that has thousands of jobs in there, and you're curious how these jobs all intertwine with one another. So, you know, what has to run first and so forth. You can highlight the group you're interested in, and you can click on the PERT diagram, and you'll see that it shows that we're looking at the accounts receivable group, and I can see it has 4 jobs in there, and I can tell that you know, there's one job that has a dependency on the next and so forth. Now, one of the things about this is it'll show the current status of the job. So in this example, all jobs are waiting on the group. I can, you know, click on the 4 dots in the bottom right-hand corner of that, and I can see more information about the job. There's a job ID, so the job master ID. What is the job definition? I can see what the job run is, and I can see the estimated time on that job. So that gives me a little bit more insight there. Now, going back, you know, so I'm looking here right now, and I see I have a finance DT group, and I see it's waiting on dependencies. And I'm like, okay, well, it's waiting on dependencies. What is it waiting on? What's, you know, preventing this from running? So I could go in and open up the job and look at dependencies and get some information here. But however, rather than do that, I can come up here and I can click on the critical path diagram. The critical path diagram now shows me really quick what's going on. So I see that the finance DT job has to wait on a few dependencies before it can run. So it has a file event, it has a group, it has 2 jobs. So right now it's saying that the reason this is not running is because the job country has timed out. So that was really quick and easy to see. Now, you know, if you have thousands of jobs, like some of our customers do, it's very hard sometimes to figure out what's preventing something to run. So as we can see from here, it was a simple click, down and dirty, brought me straight to the information that I needed at hand. The next thing that I want to talk about is the double tree diagram. So I can see, you know, so if somebody reaches out to you and says, hey, I want to hold the finance DT job. And you're like, okay. And they're like, what upstream jobs, or so what jobs is it waiting on? And what are the downstream jobs? Because I would like this not to run before a particular time, but I want to make sure that I'm not affecting some important stuff downstream. So again, if I highlight this, I can come to the double tree, and the double tree will show me that the finance DT has these objects running before it and has this object downstream. Now, by default, it comes into the all degree. So the difference there is if I just wanted to know one level up and one level down as to what this job is waiting on, so I can see one level up is waiting on these 2 jobs, and downstream, there's this record historical. Again, that's just the one level. Now, if I want to go back and show all degrees, so I could show everything upstream and everything downstream, I can go to the all degree and get that information. Now, now the next one that I want to talk a little bit about is the Gantt chart. So the Gantt chart was something that we had back in the 5.3 days, and I was very sad to see it go when we moved to the web client. We've had a number of customers over the course of time that have asked, for this particular view back. So, what is Gantt chart? How does that help? Where does it come into play? What makes it useful? And so with the Gantt chart, it basically gives you a insight to that job or to the job groups and when they're going to start and when they're going to finish. So if somebody asks you, hey, when do you expect the account or the finance or accounts receivable group to run and finish, you can click that. You can go to the Gantt chart, and you can see really quickly that the first job in that group starts 15 after midnight. And based on historical data and stuff, and the max runtime and so forth, and the average runtime, we see that job will finish at around 17 and a half minutes after midnight, and then the accounts receivable will kick in, and so we can see all the way down through what this particular group needs to run, the amount of time, and ideally when it's going to start and what time is it going to finish. So real quickly, I can look at this and tell it's going to start 15 minutes after midnight, and it's going to finish at 28:05. So it's very, very simplistic to find out information about that. Now, going back to the grid view here, say I'm looking at a whole group of jobs or lots of information, and I want to basically break it out and see, what the overall statuses are. So I can go to the Kibana or the status board, and I can easily see right now, based off of all the stuff, that I have these jobs waiting on dependencies, these waiting on groups. I have some waiting on children. I have one job and an error occurred. I have one incompleted, abnormal, timed out, and canceled. So it gives me very nicely sorted list of what I have. Now, maybe I'm not, interested in the canceled, so I can minus that or minimize that so it takes the focus away from what I'm looking at on the screen and gives me a better presentation. So going back to our grid view, we have, two other views that I'd left to talk about. So we have the radial tree, and the radial tree is interesting in that what it will do is if you select a job and go to the radial tree, it'll show that job as the center, and then it'll show the jobs outside of that is waiting, that have to go. So it actually goes from the out to the inner circle. So we know in order for this job to run, the following jobs have to complete. Now, if some of these were in a completed status or canceled status or completed abnormal, the colors would change to reflect that. And so you would see the actual statuses of the job. In addition to that, we give you the radial graph diagram. So the radial graph diagram will allow you to show jobs by their status color based on a job run relationship to each one. And the thing that's important to understand is the role of the root node. So in the radial graph view, It's the point from which all jobs originate from. And when the graph is initially displayed, it is displayed as a white circle with the middle of the graph. Let's see. So that kind of concludes what I wanted to show for the radial graph view. What we're going to look at next is I want to talk a little bit going into, one, making your life easier and how you can use some of the new features in Tidal to organize and categorize your information. So with 6.5, one of the things we've added is tags. And so there are two types of tags that one can use for the product. So there's the business activity tag, and then there's a filter tag. Now, a lot of people ask, when is one useful versus when is the other one useful? And, when should I use one versus the other? So a couple of things first to point out that most people ask or most people are under the impression that they can only have one tag per job. And that is not the case. With tags, you can have multiple tags, and you can have both business activity tags as well as filter tags. So those are unlimited. The whole purpose of the tag is for you to be able to assign keywords or key terms to a job or a set of jobs so that it's easy for you to find. So kind of like with the internet, most websites use tags, which makes it easy for people that are using, a search tool to key in some keywords and be able to locate and find that information. So what I want to do is get into the tags and talk a little bit about them and show you how they are useful. So let me go back over to the client. So right now we have tags on the left-hand side, and we can add a tag. And again, as I said, we have the business activity tag, and we have the filter tag. And what I want to do is kind of show y'all the key difference there. So I have this group of jobs here. Then I know it's my finance jobs, and I know my CFO. These are jobs that they are interested in, and they are always asking, what is the status of my jobs? When is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? And you've given them access to Tidal, but they don't really remember, what is the name? They always go, hey, what was the name of that group or whatever? What was the name of the class? So what you can do is, and we made it simplistic to add tags to a job or jobs or job group, is you highlight what you want to do. You can right-click, and then you can go in and edit the business tag or the filter tag. Now, I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit the business activity tag, and I'm going to create, let me show one thing here real quick. So going over here, right now, I only have one business activity tag. I have quarter in, and I can click on that, and I can see all my jobs down at the bottom, the job status of them as to what their status is, and easily tell that this is my quarter end jobs. And one of the things to point out is in this view, you still have the critical path, you still have the Gantt, you still have the status. So you can come in here, select one, and click on it, and I can see, oh, okay, well, this job is waiting on a dependency, so that dependency is internal to this job. So I can double-click this job, go to the dependency tab, and I can see, oh, okay, this is a time window. So the only thing that's preventing this job from running is a time window. It's not waiting on any other jobs. So, and that's what this view here showed me. So going back to the job definitions, if I right-click and I say add edit business activity tags. And I say, okay, I want to use the finance that I created for my CFO, and I'm going to add that over. I'm going to say okay. And now if I go back to business activity tags, we now see that I have a tag called finance job. And if I click on that, oops, bear with me a second. Let me go back to this. So if I click on that, it'll show me everything that is related to finance. So I could give my CTO or my CFO access to this and say, okay, you just need to go to business activity and you can go and click on finance. So it's very simplistic for them to do. And again, they can see all of their jobs, and again, they can, then take and click on that, say they're like, well, why isn't my finance DT running? They can do that and go to the critical path. Now, so that's the business activity tag. Now, you noticed I said we have filters tags. So ideally, so you would keep your business activity tags lean in that you would tag them with items that are pertinent. So you may have, 10,000 jobs in your schedule, or say 50,000 jobs in your schedule, and not every one of them is important that you're wanting like a CIO or CTO or somebody to look at, but you do want to be able to find them, pretty easy. So I can come in here and I can say, oh, I want to assign this a filter tag, and I can say nightly critical and say okay. And then when I go into job activity, I can then go into the filter and I can filter off of a particular tag and see, oh, here's all my nightly critical jobs. So again, it makes it useful for me to be able to slice and dice the information. And again, there is not a limitation to the number of business tags or activity tags, and it's not that you have to have one or the other. You can have both. So you could give a job a business activity tag and a filter tag. Okay, so let's go to the next section that I wanted to talk a little bit about to make things easier for you. So one of the things that you may have experienced over the course of time, if you're a long-time Tidal user, is that, there's times where, you'll send a job to run on an SAP system, PeopleSoft system, maybe JDE. You'll send it out to one of the various systems to run. And when you send that job to run, that system receives it, but it doesn't actually launch the job. And maybe there was a breakdown on the PeopleSoft side or whatever that caused that job to stay in a launch state. Well, we've always had the ability to say, say, hey, jobs are running at an expected time, or they didn't complete by expected time. But one of the things we were lacking was, if a job was stuck and launched, being able to find out that job was stuck and launched. And then when you did find a job stuck in launch state, there wasn't anything you could do to that job. That job was kind of in limbo, and so if you went to cancel it, it wouldn't allow you to cancel it typically. You couldn't complete it to abnormal or whatever. It was stuck there. And so there were a lot of different workarounds that one had to do. So one would, go in and disable the connection so the job would go to orphan, and then they'd set the status, or you might, worst case scenario, somebody wouldn't know about that, and so they would restart the system, because their goal was to get that job out of that launch state. So one of the things we did in listening to our customer base and understanding the pain points there, we added a new filter or a new job event tag. The job's in launch status longer than it's expected. And by default, we made that set to 5 minutes. Now, that's the default, but we also knew that people would probably want to change that. So maybe you have a tight SLA and you don't want a job launched more than a minute. Maybe, you have SAP systems that are typically overloaded, and so when you send jobs to them, that it's not uncommon for them to be in a launch state waiting on the SAP side for 10 minutes or whatever. So you can set that to whatever value you want. And so what we've done there is, again, we've added this sysval 159, and you can go in and change that. Like I said, so if that sysval is not there, the default is 5 minutes. You can insert the sysval into the sysval table and set an integer, and that integer is in minutes. So if you want to do 10 minutes, you can set it to 10, or you can set it to 9 or whatever. So that's very customizable for you. Now, what I want to do is go show you a brief demo. So this slide and these slides will be available after, and some of the stuff that I talked about in the graphical view and so forth are in slides that you can get after this webinar gets posted. But this is just showing, a simple, the update statement to set that value. In this case, it's got the value set to 3 minutes. So it's got a 3 there. And I'll go into the product and show you this here in a bit. But again, we added a new event trigger, drop stuck launch status longer than expected. And this is just kind of showing some of the stuff, but let me go show you real quick a live presentation of this. So what I'm going to do for the sake of time, because I have my system set to the default, I'm going to go ahead and insert this job into the schedule. And we're going to see that the job goes to a status of launched. And it's going to sit there and stay in a launch. So I actually had help from one of our developers to tweak the PeopleSoft environment where PeopleSoft would keep this job in launch for a long period of time. So again, you would go to job event and you would add job stuck in launch longer than expected. And then at that point, you can associate an action. Now, what has been associated with this one is to set the job to an external status, but I could have went in and added any of the other defaults, or I could go in and add, so I could add a mail action, I could add an SNMP action or whatever, so I can even add a ServiceNow action to generate a ticket to say, hey, this job is stuck and launched. And then with that job being stuck in a launch status, I then have the ability myself to go into job activity and I can then act upon that job. Now, the thing to keep in mind is when the job is in a launch status, if you go and see so if you have the default set to 5, and you go and see a job stuck and launched, and it's only been 2 minutes, you won't be able to act upon that job until the 5 minutes have passed. Because what we did there, and we did this on purpose, because we know that administrators are going to, Tidal are going to sit down and say, I deem 5 minutes is fine, I deem this is fine. But we have, most, or in some environments, we have operators that are sitting there watching the schedule. And we didn't want to have a knee-jerk reaction where if an operator looks and they see a job's in launch and they go, ooh, that job's been in launch 2 minutes, let me go ahead and act upon it. We purposely designed it to where it has to wait until the trigger has happened, and then they can set it, because you as the administrator, you may know that it's not uncommon for a job in a heavy loaded environment, out in JDE or wherever, to be in that status for a period of time. Now, we've made it easy. You can either go and pick and select jobs to add it to, or you can come in and some people may not be aware of this, so that's why I want to touch on this. We've added a couple of additional options with our job events. So we now give you the ability to say, I wanted this to apply to all jobs and groups, which means that, if you had stuck and launched and you did it to both the job and the job group, you'd get 2 notifications, because you'd get it at the job level and you'd get it at the group level. So we now give you the option to select that, or you can say, hey, I only want to do it on the job, so I don't care about the group itself. Or maybe you don't care about the jobs, but you care about the group. So if a group's in a particular status, you want to trigger on that. So we've added that to make this very customizable. Now, part of this, I can see, if I wanted to add a description as to what this is for, I could. I can go into the trigger history and I can see the history of when this job event has triggered. That's very useful. I can also go into event activity and I can go to my launch status event. I say, oh, I can see it's triggered 4 times today. So this allows me to go and see, do I have something that's happening or occurring? Is there something in my environment that I need to, be aware of? So if I come back over to job activity, this job that I had, we see that it's now changed to a status of external defined, because the event's been 5 minutes and it's now triggered. Okay, so with that, I am done. I greatly appreciate the time today, guys. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Eric Smith, who can go forward with the final presentation.
All right. Thank you for that, Ken. Let me go ahead
Thanks,
and
sir.
share out mine. All right. Good morning. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I really appreciate it. My name is Eric Smith, and I've been supporting the application for going on about 11 years now. I'm sure I've talked to quite a few of you in that tenure. So today, I'm going to be discussing 2 topics. The first topic is actually a new option that was recently added in Title 6.3.2, and this is actually a new job event action called Rerun with Delay. So the Rerun with Delay option is helpful when you may have a job or a job group that fails with a particular status, and it needs to be rerun until that job completes normally, for instance. So for example, let's say that we have a job which requires a file to be present in order for that job to complete normally. When that file isn't available, that job is going to either go to error occurred or complete abnormally, and we want to rerun that job until the file is available and the job does complete normally. So as I had mentioned before, this was added in 6.3.2, and it's present in all new versions of the application since. You can actually see on the current slide the new action highlighted with a maximum number of reruns and then a delay on reruns. So when you actually set up the action, you can specify a maximum number of reruns. The max value here can actually be set to 9,999, or alternatively, you can specify 0, and that will allow for an unlimited number of reruns until that event trigger no longer hits that condition. In my next slide, you can actually see here I've got highlighted the delay on run. So you can actually specify a delay in minutes for the actual runtime or for the actual rerun. This could be probably helpful when you actually want a delay from the initial run of the job. So for example, let's say that you have an original job that's looking for a file that hasn't been made available yet, but you're aware of that file being available in the next 5 minutes. So there's a 5-minute interval between the first run and the second run. What you can do is you can actually specify a 5-minute delay for the rerun so the job will execute successfully on the second run. I'll go ahead and give you guys a quick demonstration of this. It's a pretty simple setup. This is a 655 environment, just to kind of give you guys a quick demonstration of what my job is. It's very simple. What we're going to be doing is we're going to execute a sleep command for 10 seconds. The job will complete normally. At that point, the job event that we have associated with it, which is the job rerun event, which I'll go into detail here in a second, will execute after it completes abnormally, and then it'll trigger the event to take place, at which point it'll begin its rerun cycle. So I'm going to go ahead and insert this into the schedule. All right, and we can come up here to job activity. We can see here that the job's gone rating on resource. It is now in a launch state. It's active. It's going to run for the 10 seconds per the sleep command. All right, and it should be finishing up here. Okay, so it's gone to waiting on dependencies. If we open up our job, we can check the audit log and we can see that the job has gone from waiting on dependencies to launch to active. It did complete normally, and now it's back in a waiting on dependency state. The dependency being the time delay that we've actually set up on our job event. So again, just to kind of reiterate our job event here, we've got the rerun action set. We can actually open that up here. You can see that the maximum number of reruns is 5, so meaning that after the initial run of the job and the execution, the event will trigger. It'll run 5 times, and it'll run 1 time each time that trigger is event up to 5. Each time that event is triggered, up to 5 times per that value. And then for the delay on rerun, we actually have it set for 1 minute in between each execution. Ken's already gone over information regarding the all jobs and groups and being able to apply the event, so I'm not going to reiterate that again. Trigger history, same thing, associated jobs. We can go back up here to our job activity. And let's see, we should be honing in on our resource or on our execution again. Looks like we just got it. So as you can see here, the event trigger has actually triggered because it's been 1 minute. It did complete normally, so it did satiate those requests. The job is again active. It'll run for the 10 seconds per the sleep command, at which point it'll go back into a waiting on dependencies condition. And we are complete. We can actually open up our audit log and see that the job again has gone from waiting on dependencies, launched, active, completed normally, to waiting on dependencies. This will go ahead and continue on for 4 more times per the specifications that we made on the event itself. And as Ken mentioned, with everything, you can go into the event activity, open up the event itself. You can see how many times that it has triggered today, as well as how many times it has triggered since its inception. Okay. All right. So there's actually, now if you are on a version prior to 6.3.2, there are a couple of options available for doing this process manually. Option 1 is actually setting up a job group with 2 jobs, the job to be rerun and then a sleep job. The sleep job basically is the action for the delay, correct? So you can actually set up the rerun option if the job group completes abnormally, for instance, and then with the sleep job, that will act as your buffer, that will act as your delay. Option 2 is actually utilizing a variable. It gets a little bit more complex, but basically you can set up an action to trigger an update to a variable when the job fails. Then you can actually have a sleep job set to run every time the variable value is equal to X. And at that point, the sleep job will then update the variable back to a different value once completed. The failing job will have a variable dependency on the variable equaling the value of X with the option to rerun each time that dependency is met. To actually conserve time, I'll post both of these examples to the customer portal, so anybody who is interested in running that on a version prior to 6.3.2 can actually take a look at that at their own leisure. The next thing that I'd like to actually talk about is talking about troubleshooting and resolving issues faster with logging. Logging is a very common thing, and in fact, anytime you probably call into the support center, there's questions about logs, whether they be master, client manager, adapter host. There's multiple benefits of a properly configured logging level, but a few are the ability to really proactively provide data to the support engineer for faster issue resolution. Obviously, if you've got, if you understand the values and the logs that are generated, if you know where the issue may be occurring at, for instance, if it's occurring on the client manager and you understand that you need to allocate or increase additional logging on the client manager and maybe not so much on the master, then you know ahead of time what logs you may want to provide to the engineer for getting to that point of resolution quicker. Also, we can reduce unnecessary noise in the log files for more succinct troubleshooting. Obviously, if we've got everything jacked up to high debug across all components of the application, it's going to generate a lot of noise within the application, and it's going to be a little bit harder to try to isolate what the actual issue is when we're having to sort through multiple lines of logs in the data. So also, it gives us the ability to identify configuration or performance issues in the application. We can actually see if there's any sort of degradation or if there's any sort of hangups or problems that may be occurring that we can address. So having a properly configured environment will actually allow us to get to that point of resolution quicker. Recently added in 6.3.4 of the application, you can actually now modify the logging levels for the client manager using both the web and the Java client user interface. I know this was a really big deal before, simply because if you're in a production environment and your client manager needs to have additional logging jacked up, then you necessarily can't just stop in the middle of a day. We respect that, we understand that. So what we did was we actually created the option to provide additional logging from the system configuration client logging tab. Basically, what this does is it allows you to dynamically change the client manager logging levels without actually having to restart the CM service. And another cool feature that you can actually do is you can exclude specific client managers whose logging levels don't necessarily need to be modified in the event that you're running a multiple client manager service environment. So for customers that may be doing load balancing, for instance, and you notice that there's a particular issue with latency on one of the client managers of the two, obviously you don't need to turn up logging on both sides. You can really just do it from one side. So there's the cross concurrent, basically across all areas of the application. The logging levels range from none, as we can see here on the screen, all the way up to high debug. Each level builds off of itself. So none is just that. There's no logging that's actually generated. High debug is basically the highest level that you can have. High debug is going to provide you with the most detailed levels of logging in the log files. For the client manager specifically, the 4 areas that are monitored via logging of the client manager are going to be the RPC logs. These are going to be low-level RPC calls from the client manager back to the master and other endpoints such as the API. The request log, these are going to be logs that request that the client manager sends and receives from the master. The DSP log, which are the logs that get generated to the DSP plugins directory. These are anything related to the DSP module. And then client log, which is any kind of like client-related log. Basically anything that doesn't fall into those 3 prior categories. When you do increase the logging or when you enable logging, they're located in a default location, the install directory for the client manager. There's actually 2 points of logging for the client manager. There's the logs option under the client manager's root install, and then there's also the plugins TES 6.5 or whatever version you may be running. There's going to be a set of logs there as well, and those are the logs that are really focused around plugins and .dsp data. Under system configuration and logging, you can also modify the logging levels for the master. Again, somebody from the support team will be able to guide you and advise you on which logging levels to increase based upon the details of your issue. Again, this does not require any sort of master restart, so these are all dynamically changing on the fly. If you have an issue with your compiler at midnight, you can come in here, you can modify the compiler log to high debug. That'll provide additional resources for the debugging of the compiler module, and then from there you don't have to restart. Nothing has to be messed around with in the master.props or anything like that. This is all dynamically changing. There is the components that can be monitored are the scheduler log, client manager log, agent manager log, compiler log, job manager log, event manager log, queue manager logs, database logs, and communication logs. And again, kind of depending on what application or what sort of problems you're actually encountering within the application, someone from the support center will be able to kind of guide you as to what logging levels need to be increased and at what level. The next screen, you can actually see the default locations. It's only one for the master log. It's going to be in the master's log directory for both Windows and Unix. While we're talking about logging, I did want to mention one thing here. So there's additional logging that you can actually enable for the adapters. To increase logging levels for the adapters, all you want to do is open up your master connection and select the drop down beside the host environmental log. Keep in mind, though, that this will enable logging for all configured adapter types, meaning that even if you're just troubleshooting, say, an SAP connection, however, you have an SAP business objects, a JDBC adapter, and maybe an IICS adapter, it's going to enable high debug across all of those adapters. So you just might want to keep that in mind. It's not specific to any one adapter. The default locations for the adapter logs are found in the services directory on the master. Now, depending on which adapter you have configured, there's also going to be an associated GUID for that adapter. The logs are actually going to be located under that particular GUID for that directory. So, for instance, let's say that, and you can actually find these in the administration area under adapters in both the client manager user interface as well as the Java client. And all you'd have to do is just click on the adapters, find the corresponding adapter, and that would provide you with the GUID associated with that. And then from there, you would just go into the services directory on the master's install, and you'd be able to locate the logs directory. You can also enable debug on both Windows and Unix agents. So to enable high debug for Windows, simply open up the Tidal Service Manager, stop the service. You're going to select the ellipses to the right of the corresponding Tidal agent instance. If you have multiple, obviously you want to choose the one that you want to enable high debug on. And then you're going to add the parameter debug equals high to the end of the path field. This will require a restart of the agent, so that just keep that in mind if there are other jobs that are executing on that current agent that may be impacted by that restart. You can actually add logging as well to the Unix agent, as I mentioned before. So to enable high debug for the Unix agent is a little different. So with that, you actually want to open up the tagent.ini file. Now, this is going to be found in the bin directory under the install path for the agent. And for this, you actually want to add a parameter called OVB, that's Oscar Victor Bravo, equals title debug to the agent file, and then you're going to restart the agent again. With this, you can actually, if you wanted to place all agent instances on that server into high debug, you're going to want to place a parameter under the config header, which you can see on the left side of my screen. It's what I have highlighted on the left screenshot. If you were looking to enable logging for a particular agent instance, then locate that instance in the tagent.ini file and then place that parameter under that particular instance, which you can actually see on the right side of my screen. Basically, what that's saying is that we're only enabling title debug for the agent referred to as SunTS06JL. So some additional notes regarding best practices. If you are enabling logging before contacting technical support, I would probably start at the info level, and someone here will be able to provide additional instructions for logging after reviewing your issue. If you're not actively troubleshooting an issue, setting the logging to severe will prevent excessive amounts of log files from being generated for each component. Just keep in mind that it does generate a certain amount of log files that are 1 megabyte in size. So you may want to ensure that you have the correct amount of space allocated on the hard drive for keeping that amount. You can actually also use the log directory in the master.props file to specify an alternate location for those logs. So for instance, like let's say that your C drive, which is the default location on a Windows server where the master gets installed, maybe it has a limited amount of hard drive space and you want to actually allocate or specify an additional location to offload those log files to. You could use the log directory and specify the location in the master.props to tell the master where to place those logs. You can also use the max log files parameter, and this is going to allow you to actually retain more than default 100 megabyte log files in the master's log directory. That's actually kind of helpful in a situation where maybe, for instance, let's say that you've got, obviously the higher the amount of debug you have in your master, the quicker the log files are going to be generated, and thusly the quicker they're actually going to roll off and be deleted. So if you encounter an issue at say 1 a.m. and your first operator doesn't come in until 6 a.m. to start checking logs, those logs more than likely have already been rolled off from the time that the incident occurred at 1 a.m. What using the max log files does is it allows you to actually go beyond the default 101 megabyte limit that's put on it by the master. So let's say that you need 500 master log files. You can actually use max log files equals 500. It'll actually retain 500 log files, and then that in conjunction with the log directory option allows you to take that 500 log files, specify an alternate location at a different source. That way it doesn't blow out that particular hard drive, eat up a lot of space with with extra logging information. So that pretty much wraps it up for me. I appreciate everybody who attended, and I thank everybody for their time. Rick, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eric. Great data. So guys, there's a few pieces of news, and then we'll jump into questions. There's a bunch of questions out there. So, you know, if you are interested in these and other tips and tricks, there is a section for this on our customer portal here. So if you look under Support Center, under Knowledge Base, at the bottom of that section, you'll see a tips and tricks section. And so, you know, you'll find more of this type of data there as well. And there's a lot of questions about, would the slides be available? Are we recording the session? And yes to both of those. This session will be recorded, and our slides are all going to be posted on the portal as well. So next slide, Eric. All of you should have received an email, probably 2 of them now, from Ken regarding an offer for extended support. So end of life for version 6.2 and 6.3 are coming soon. So September 2021 for 6.2, March 2022 for 6.3. So for those of you who for some reason cannot upgrade to a supported version by that time, we will be offering support for the older versions for an additional fee. So if for some reason you don't think you're going to be able to make those dates, you know, please reach out to your account manager, and we'll provide additional information on this for you at that time. Eric, next. We have a new report on IT automation in a multi-cloud world that we sponsored with Enterprise Management Associates that's now available for download on the customer portal as well. So feel free to go out there, check that out. You know, if you're scheduling in the cloud, if this is something that's of interest to your organization moving forward, certainly some great data in there. Feel free to go out to the portal and you can download that there. Next slide, Eric. So we've got a number of virtual user group meetings scheduled for the next 2 months, I think. So we've had a number of them over the last couple of weeks, but we have Indiana, Michigan coming up in March 2nd, Iowa, Nebraska, and Ohio on March 9th, a New England one scheduled for April 6th, and one for our Canadian customers on April 12th. So please reach out to your account manager if you'd like to participate in these events. Since they are virtual events, you know, even if you're not in one of these regions, but you know you'd like to join and one of those dates works well for you, certainly reach out to your account manager, and I'm sure we can accommodate getting you an invitation and getting you signed up for those events. And then the last slide, I think I have one more on there. Our next webinar will be March 25th, and then it will provide details on our winter launch. So we'll go through Time of Oracle Beyond, it'll go through new features, enhancements, and all of that. So with that, let's go over to the Q&A. We've got a lot of questions. I don't know that we're going to get to them all, but the first one, which has been asked multiple times, with regards to the graphical views, what versions are those available, Ken?
Those were added in 6.5.5.
Okay. And then there's also a question, same question about business activity tags. What versions are required for those?
That was added in Service Pack 4 or 6.5.4.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's see. There was a question about, you know, there's a couple different questions to this effect. But, you know, when you show an example of a Gantt chart, for example, did that require any inputs or pre-configuration on your part, or did Tidal, you know, figure out all the dependencies, create the Gantt chart all on the fly?
Tidal did all that on the fly. So one of the things that it uses is, so when you're in a job definition, you'll notice on the Run tab, there's a duration, which the duration, there's an estimate, which is always getting updated based on how the job is running. But you can go in there and configure a max and a min time. So it uses all of that in conjunction to come up with the time window, but if you're not entering the max and min time, it's looking at the historical data, but all that's done on the fly. It looks to see what dependencies and so forth are associated with those jobs.
So do you have to expand the group to see waiting jobs? There was a question about that as well.
Yes, you would need to expand the group to see the actual jobs that are waiting in there.
Okay. Perfect. Let's see, to add the tags, do you need to be able to modify the job definitions? If yes, are the tags able to be transported?
You do need to be able to modify the job definition, and so tags are not available to transport in Transporter, but our new tool, the Tidal repository, does move those items or those tags from one environment to the next.
Okay, excellent. So there was another question about that as well. Knock that off. With the event for jobs and launch status, where it sets the job to an external status, what status is that?
So you can have it set to any status if you want. The external status is a status that most people or customer sites use when that they have a job that something's happened with it and they don't know what the actual status is, so that someone needs to make a intelligent decision. And so the external just kind of raises a flag in most environments that says, hey, this job's externally set, so let me go see what happened or occurred. But you could actually have the job or the event do an action of sending you an email or raising an alert in Tidal. So for those that are familiar with Tidal alerts, it gives you the ability, you could raise the alert in the alert screen. You can then go click on that job and, act upon it and add a note in the alert as to, what you're doing or why. But you could have it actually set to any status.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. What are some use cases where the job event rerun function would be better used than the rerun setup in the job definitions?
So that's a good question. So the delayed rerun, where that is most useful is that, so if you do a rerun on the job itself, then that means that job's going to run every X minutes the way you have it configured. But say for some reason you have a job that occasionally it completes abnormally, and you know that when that job completed abnormally, that typically you can wait like 5 minutes and then go rerun the job and it'll work, because it's waiting on something outside, or that you're gonna maybe with Tidal you raise a ticket and someone goes and says, oh, I need to go put the tape in, or I need to go do X, Y, Z in that environment. And that typically they do that within 10 minutes or so. So you can have a delayed rerun on there so that that job will actually wait X minutes and then go rerun. So it's a case of where you don't want to just have that job always rerunning and rerunning. It's only you want to rerun it when it's, say, maybe completed abnormal or went to a particular status.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. So, Eric, a couple questions on logging. There might be a few more. Ken, I'll get back to you on those. But on the logging, a couple logging questions. Is there any logging of security activity? So user role changes, adding users, things like that?
That's actually all logged in the message logs. If you look under when you're in your application, if you look under logs there, any type of modification or changes that are made to a security policy or to a user granting a new security policy level, even users logging in, and if appropriately if they log out, then that will be actually logged in the logs of the application. It's actually in the client manager and in the Java client as well under logs on the left hand side.
Perfect, thank you. Is logging for inbound Tidal REST API going to be tied to client manager logging levels?
I would believe so, because it is, considering that it is an API call, it would be associated with the client manager. It wouldn't actually be logged at that master level.
Yeah, it would get logged in the CM. One thing I wanted to add, and this kind of answers one of the questions I saw in there for one particular user, was that, so for those that aren't aware, we have an APM stream that's in the master. We're doing a phased approach, so with each release, we're adding new pieces of information. And so with the APM stream, the master is actually pumping out information. And so to start with, it's pumping out information about memory and the threads. But the ultimate goal is that information about jobs, security changes, different types of information like that will eventually be added to this, so it'll get pumped into a data lake. And in the data lake, if you're someone who wants to, is a do-yourselfer and you're familiar with Kibana or I'm trying to think of the other one, you can actually do dashboards against that. So I think it was Stace that had asked this question, but so eventually you will be able to set up your own dashboard outside of Tidal, or we will have something to do that as well.
Excellent. So there's a lot of questions that we were unable to get to, so we're at the top of the hour, but we will get to answering those questions, posting them on the portal. Thank you all for coming out. I think we were close to 300 on this one, so it was a good event. Thank you very much. But we will get answers to those questions as well as post the recording and the slides by early next week onto the portal. So thank you all very much. Once again, thank you, Ken. Thank you, Eric. Wonderful job. Some really great feedback here on the work that you did and that they want more of these sessions. So great job. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great day, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, everyone.